Does anyone have any questions concerning the court's prior instructions on what the prohibitions are concerning information in this case? 36.
Yes, sir. Would there be any kind of form that I could present to my employer? Because I'm from the state of Florida, and they are very particular about, you know what I mean.
Do you need me to call somebody?
I may.
Does anyone have any questions concerning the court's prior instructions on what the prohibitions are concerning information in this case? 36.
Yes, sir. Would there be any kind of form that I could present to my employer? Because I'm from the state of Florida, and they are very particular about, you know what I mean.
Do you need me to call somebody?
I may. And I left today.
There will be a form that will be provided to you from the clerk that outlines the fact that you've been selected for the jury and the length of the trial.
Judge Stephen Everett, everybody. That was one of my favorite moments from jury selection. When after the jury was sworn in, Judge Everett asked if anybody had any outstanding issues, and juror 36 said, "Hey, I work for the state of Florida. They're very particular. Can you give me some kind of form?" So that's going to be my new catchphrase from now on. You need me to call somebody for you? Absolutely love it. Thank you for being patient tonight, everybody. I was uploading videos from the trial today, and time got away from me, and then kids needed dinner. So this recap is a little later than I wanted it to be. However, I think it's going to be worth the wait because I have all of the information for you, every single thing that happened during day one of the Donna Adelson trial today. If you are new to this case, I have an entire playlist on my channel. If you go to the main channel page and then click on playlists, there is a Donna Adelson or just Adelson Trial playlist there. And I've had my full recap or my explanation of the case, as well as reading the emails between Donna and her daughter Wendy, as well as the last couple of days of jury selection, who the jury is. And then today, I broke up all of the videos or all of the testimonies into smaller videos. So the opening statement, the closing statement, the lead detective on the case, the next door neighbor, these are all individual videos now that you can go and watch when you have time, because Judge Everett is trying to stay on schedule, and he is definitely wanting to work all of this. You know, he's trying to maximize his time as much as he can. We started at 7:45 Central Time this morning, and we went until about 4 o'clock-ish, 3:45 or so. So it's about 8 hours of video from today, but I clipped everything out so that all the breaks are gone. A lot of the sidebars are gone. So you're able to see just the condensed version of what was done today. I've got the prosecution opening statement separated from the defense opening statement, and then the witnesses are separated out. Now, there are a couple that I didn't do, and I'll explain why. But it's a good way to consume the trial if you don't just have 8 hours to sit there and have it playing in your ear while you're doing the rest of your day. So first of all, thank you so much for being here tonight. Thanks for supporting the channel. Please take a second to subscribe. About 50% of the people who watch my channel or watch my videos don't subscribe to the channel, but it's the best free way to support the channel. If you're brand new here, welcome to you. I am Megan Connor, the host of the Midlife Revolution podcast, where we talk all about making small changes that end up becoming revolutionary. And what does that have to do with true crime? Well, the channel is all about healthy relationships, healthy family systems, healthy religions. And the Adelson case, unfortunately, is none of those things. And so that was one of the reasons why it drew my attention. There are also a ton of parallels between this case and my family's case. Lori Vallow Daybell is my cousin. And what's really interesting to me is that there are, and obviously I've got a hair trigger for it. I'm going to see things that match up where maybe some other people won't see those things, but there are just too many things that can't be coincidental. This family system acted very much like my family system, And they had some of the same harmful behaviors, the same harmful beliefs that led them down this path where somebody lost their life. And what I'm really grateful for is that, in my case, there were several victims. In this case, there's one person that lost their life. But so far, we've had 4 convictions over this one victim. And I absolutely am here for it 100%. And I actually hope that they're also going to indict one more person. And we'll get to that as we get to it. So I don't know how many of you have heard of this case or are just brand new to it. So I'll give you just a very brief synopsis. This all started with a toxic family system. Donna Adelson, the matriarch of a family where she was trying to be very controlling about everything that her kids did, who they dated, and what their profession was, and all of those things. And so her daughter, Wendi, was dating around, not enough for Mama Donna. And so Mama decided to be really controlling about who she dated. And Donna found someone she thought was perfect for Wendi on the website JDate. They're a Jewish family. Donna wanted her children to marry within the faith. And so Donna picked out Dan Markel specifically for Wendi. Well, they ended up getting married. Dan's family was much more Orthodox Jewish than Donna's family. And they requested that there be kosher food at the wedding reception. Well, Donna served shrimp egg rolls, if I remember correctly, which are not kosher. And Dan had to make a very embarrassing announcement after people in his family had already started eating their dinner. So that was just, I don't even think that was probably the first red flag, but it was a red flag on a day that was supposed to be really super happy for everybody. And things kind of just went downhill from there. They moved into this neighborhood as newlyweds with no children. And Dan became a professor at Florida State University, a professor of law. Wendi was also an attorney. She also became a professor. They had 2 little boys together. And, things didn't last very long. They were only married about 5 years before they decided to go ahead and get divorced. Well, as you can imagine, with 2 attorneys, the divorce proceedings were very contentious. The main crux of the issue stemming around the fact that Wendi didn't really like living in Tallahassee. She really wanted to be closer to her parents who lived in Miami because they are an enmeshed family system, which means that they tell each other everything. Mom gets to call a lot of the shots. They don't really have their own identity outside of the family. And with Donna controlling everything, she was really pushing Wendi hard to get Dan to agree that Wendi could relocate to Miami with the boys. Well, that's when Dan filed the famous motion to make sure that Donna could not have unsupervised visits with the children. Donna was disparaging Dan. Almost every time there was a FaceTime call, she could be heard in the background, calling Dan stupid, calling him different names, really disparaging him to the children, alienating the children against him. And so Dan files this motion to make sure that Donna can't have unsupervised visitation, and Donna absolutely went nuts. That's when she doubled down on the control. She started sending all these emails to Wendi, telling her exactly what she should be saying to her lawyer, what she should be asking for. And before you know it, things just spiraled into toxicity. And allegedly, Donna conspired with her son, Charlie, to order a hit on Dan Markel. Now, Wendi likes to assert that she knew nothing about this. She had no idea what was going on, but I have my doubts, given the fact that they were such an enmeshed family, given the fact that they tell each other everything. And also, on the day of the incident in question, Donna, a couple of weeks prior, made an appointment for the Geek Squad to come out to Wendi's house on the morning of the incident to check on her TV, which had been cracked by one of the children throwing something at it. That way, Wendi had an alibi for exactly when the incident took place. Donna was the one who made the appointment. But later, after the incident, when Wendy's at the police department, they take her phone, they download some things just to rule her out, and they discover that Wendy has deleted that Geek Squad appointment from her phone. So in my opinion, along with a lot of other things, that means that she just may be complicit. So the way that it worked, allegedly, is that Donna encouraged her son, Charlie, to get in touch with his old girlfriend, who had some ties to some unsavory people, as the prosecution called it today. And so Catherine Magbanawa, who was Charlie's ex-girlfriend, got in touch with her ex-boyfriend, the father of her kids. And he had solved some problems in the past before. And so she arranged for everything. But here's what came out today that was really damning against Donna. Spoiler for you. Donna signed her name to every single check that was written to Catherine Magbanawa. So it's a little bit convoluted, it's a little bit complicated, but I'm going to go through all the evidence that came out today in court. We're going to talk about both opening statements and all of the witnesses, and I'll tell you exactly what came out. And, you can share with me in the comments your opinions, your questions. I want to know how you're feeling about how everything happened today. I have to say, I was profoundly affected by the final witness today, and I'm still really trying to untangle how I feel about it. I almost want to watch the entirety of his testimony again because it really affected me on a deep level. I'm trying to figure out why. I think there was something about his facial expressions, his demeanor, his body language, the way he carried himself. I'm trying to really understand why that affected me so much. Maybe we'll figure it out together. Maybe you guys can help me. So let's start off first with opening statements from the prosecution today. Sarah Catherine Dugan gave the opening statement today. And in my opinion, she did an excellent job recapping all of the details of the case. She spoke for almost an hour and 30 minutes, and I was not bored at all. Sometimes I used to sit in Mormon General Conference and listen to the conference leaders, the leaders of the church, talk for 20 minutes, and I felt like it was 6 hours. But this today, she spoke for less than an hour and a half, and I just felt like it went by like that. She was so concise in spelling everything out, and she did a great job of calling attention to the really important details. First of all, she did a great job of honoring Dan Markel. He was an excellent father to his two boys, who were just 3 and 4 at the time of this incident. The custody battle was ended with a dismissal from the court with prejudice, which means that the opposing party cannot continue to bring any more lawsuits. That was it. It was over. I want to say also that Dan's parents and Dan's sister, Shelley, were in the courtroom today. Numerous times the cameras panned over to them. Dan's father, his facial expressions, just very pained, very hard to look at. Dan's mom, very involved, very interested. When I think of what this family has gone through, it's really, really heartbreaking. But the prosecutor first went out and painted Donna Adelson to be extremely controlling, not just overbearing, not just overly involved, but extremely controlling. They talked about the emails, and this is what I was excited about. Now, I know the opening statements are not evidence, but those emails that I went over in that video the other day that were so damning against Donna, those were brought in to the opening statement today. I had forgotten about Donna Adelson's $1 million bribe. After Dan Markel filed that famous motion to make sure that Donna could not have unsupervised visitation with his children, Donna was willing to bribe him $1 million if he would allow the relocation to happen for Wendy to move the boys to Miami. I had forgotten about that part. I also had forgotten that Catherine Magbanawa, who was the one who communicated between Charlie, Donna's son, and the actual hitman and the driver in this incident, she facilitated all of these things. Donna Adelson wrote checks to her from Charlie's business to pay her off for arranging this situation. And what did she do? She went out and got a boob job. I forgot about that little detail because it's been a couple years since I dug into this. Yeah, the emails and the opening statements were so damning. Now we'll get to Wendy's quote unquote immunity deal. She has derivative use immunity, which is very narrow in scope, but she has a lot of hubris. In fact, one of the things I'm going to do tomorrow is I'm going to go clip out all of the testimonies that she has given in each one of these trials. And we're going to sort of compare and contrast where she's changed her story, where things are not necessarily the same as they were before, where she has lied, or where she has just refused to answer a question with a straight answer. It is limited immunity, which means that only the things that she testifies to, she can't be prosecuted on. But if they find other evidence, and I think they have plenty, then they can use that against her, not just the testimony that she's already given. One of the emails that really struck me the most, the final email that I read in my video about Wendy versus Donna with these emails, was Donna invoking World War II, invoking Nazism, saying that in World War II, American troops went down behind enemy lines dressed as Nazis to get done what they needed to get done. And Donna was using that as an example of what Wendy needs to do in her divorce, to just get it done. Just do whatever you have to do. And they were discussing baptizing these two beautiful boys into Catholicism just to get back at Dan for wanting them to be more Orthodox Jewish. And I talked about this in my video about how confusing that would have been for these poor boys who were 2 and 4 at the time to be going to synagogue and then having their mom baptize them into Catholicism without really understanding what any of this meant, and going to one church when they're with their mom and a different church when they're with their dad. And we're not just talking like the difference between Lutherans and Baptists here, where they're both, you know, Christian religions. They might practice a little bit differently. They might believe a little bit differently. This is Judaism, where they don't believe the Messiah has come yet, and Christianity, where they believe the Messiah came 2,000 years ago. That's a pretty huge difference for those poor boys to have to try and absorb. And my biggest problem with this whole thing is, in this entire custody battle, who was focused on the kids? I believe Dan was, but it is sure apparent that definitely Donna did not give a crap about the kids' experience. She just wanted what she wanted, which was to have Wendy and the boys to herself in Miami, period. Really stunning. Then some text messages from Charlie came in where he referred to that Nazi shit. Same kind of thing. It kind of blows my mind. And guys, listen, I'm just going to apologize in advance to anybody who's Jewish, because I don't know very much about the Jewish religion. I know just a little bit. But is it okay in Judaism? Is it okay for faithful Jewish people to invoke Nazism so much? I don't understand this at all. And it wasn't that they were saying, yeah, the Nazis were awful, we hate the Nazis. It was like them acting like the Nazis. What? I'm just super confused about this. As a 7th generation Mormon, I can't imagine, when I was faithful, pretending to be some of the people who arrested and killed Joseph Smith, or invoking that idea for any reason in my life. That whole thing is abhorrent to me, and I just don't understand it. So maybe somebody can help me understand it. I don't know. Then they talked about, in the opening statement, about how there were a lot of code words that got used. For example, TV was code word for, Charlie said that he bought Wendy a TV instead of hiring a hitman. They talked about relationship advice. They talked about there being a problem that needed taken care of. But the thing is, everybody who is listening to these conversations knew exactly what they were talking about. So they talked about the fact that Luis Rivera, who was the driver And he was the one who talked. He was the one who cooperated with the authorities to get all of these people convicted. And then they said that it was Sigfredo Garcia who was the one who was supposed to call the number on the paper that was given to Donna during the infamous bump. So if you're new to the case, what ended up happening is that kind of the communication went quiet and the authorities were trying to get the co-conspirators to talk to each other. So one of the FBI agents posed as a gang member and approached Donna on the street with a piece of paper that had Dan Markel's picture on it and handwritten $5,000 on it. And this agent handed it to Donna and said, "I know you helped my friend Katie. Well, my cousin is also in jail because of this same situation where we took care of this problem for you, and we're hoping that you're going to help him out too." And so at the time, of course, Donna was like, "I don't know who you are. I don't know what you're talking about." But then she immediately picked up the phone and started calling people and saying, "What's going on?" So this paper ends up in the hands of Sigfredo Garcia. He ends up calling the phone number on the paper. It gets everybody talking. And we got a bunch of wiretaps and a bunch of recordings from all of these co-conspirators talking to each other. Thanks for saying this, Miss Angry Seth, because I really thought for a second like I was crazy. It is very, very weird. Oh, I like your mug, by the way. That's what I was having my coffee out of this morning as well. Absolutely love it. Then the prosecutor started talking about the fact that in Charlie Adelson's business, they had a lot of cash lying around because they gave cash discounts to their patients who would, were willing to pay in cash instead of using insurance or credit. And so in my mind, I'm imagining, okay, a business like that where you can go in and have a procedure that costs several $100s, they're giving you a discount if you use cash because they want you to pay in cash. Why? Because then they don't have to report it to the IRS. And sure enough, they just had a safe full of cash sitting there in the dental practice. And Charlie Adelson had a habit of stapling stacks of hundreds together and putting them in his safe. Then I forgot about this too, and it literally made me laugh out loud when I remembered it. Katie McBanawa commented about how when she received the cash for this payout, that it was sort of damp, like it was wet. Donna Adelson literally threw those stacks of cash into the washing machine and washed them. She thought that's what money laundering meant, which is another one of those reasons why I'm like, again, just dumb criminal behavior. Now, when Charlie Adelson went on trial in 2023, just days after he was convicted, Donna Adelson and her husband Harvey were arrested at Miami airport. They were on their way to Vietnam. They had one-way tickets. They had applied for an emergency visa, and Donna's computer searches came up with countries that don't have extradition to the United States. This is one of those things where, after observing everything that Charlie did and the evidence that everybody had, I know they weren't present at the trial. I actually learned that today. But if they knew what evidence there was, and I know Donna was talking to Charlie all the time when he was in prison because we have all of these recordings. But Donna genuinely believed that Charlie was not going to be convicted. She genuinely believed he was going to be acquitted of all his charges. And that's why she waited until he was convicted to try and leave the country. If she had spent just a few minutes looking at the evidence and using some critical thinking, deductive reasoning, she probably would have come to the conclusion that, hey, it looks bad for Charlie. He's probably going to get convicted. She should have left the country way before she did, but it turns out she waited until after the verdict came down before she and her husband went to the airport. And that's where they were arrested. So then we talked a little bit about the jailhouse snitches. When Donna Adelson was arrested and she was put in prison, she was literally talking about paying some people in the jailhouse to say some things that were not true. And she literally wrote out a script. She's so controlling that she's asking these snitches to say things that are untrue, but she has to write out the script word for word. I bet she was probably practicing with them so that they could memorize their lines. I just, this is a wild sort of scenario for me to really think about. So I really thought that Sarah did an excellent job of presenting the case in a very concise manner. Again, she spoke for almost an hour and 30 minutes. It felt like it went by really quickly. She did a great job of honoring Dan, both at the beginning and at the end. That's what she started and ended with. And then Jackie Fulford got up. And first of all, she looks a lot like Donna. She looks like Donna did maybe 15 years ago or so. And if you have dug into Jackie Fulford's past at all, there's a little bit of, I don't know, questionable activity, wondering if she is the most ethical person in the world. I'm just going to real quickly share my screen with you so that you can see what I found about Jackie Fulford. So here's Jackie all the way on the right. That's her today in court. But if you look over to the left, she looks much younger, and she actually used to be a judge. Here's an interesting article that I found. Judge Jackie Fulford ordered to retire. This was reported on September 30th of 2015. Circuit Judge Jackie L. Fulford's career on the bench ended Wednesday as the Florida Supreme Court ordered her involuntary retirement because of a physical disability. The disability interferes with Fulford's performance as a judge, justices wrote in their final order. All 6 justices and Chief Justice Jorge Labarga, were in agreement after the Judicial Qualifications Commission in late August recommended Fulford's mandatory retirement. Fulford was being investigated by the JQC on charges of improprieties while she served on the bench in Wakulla County. She's a former 2nd Judicial Circuit Chief Assistant State Attorney who was appointed to the bench in 2009 and ran unopposed in 2010. Now, according to things that I've heard on different podcasts that I listen to and, different stories floating around out there, Crash, you beat me to it. She faked a cancer diagnosis? ? I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what people are saying. She was being investigated for impropriety, and then suddenly she got cancer, and her cancer treatment was preventing her from fulfilling her duties on the bench, so they asked her to resign because she couldn't fulfill her duties on the bench. So she may have had cancer. I don't know. Justine says she was limping today when she got up. She has some physical problems. It definitely is sad. I don't know if she was really faking cancer, or if she actually had cancer, but it just seems like she was being investigated, and then all of a sudden she fell gravely ill, and they had to ask her to resign due to her illness, not due to the investigation. To me, it's a little bit suspicious. Let me just go back because there's one other thing. Oop, did not mean to do that. Okay. So I feel like that's all I'm comfortable sharing right now. Because I really don't have any concrete proof on some of the other things that I've heard. I have heard that she owns a funeral home. I haven't seen the receipts on that. I would want to look at the business records. I would want to see the articles of incorporation to make sure that I'm, covering that appropriately. So I don't ever want to put misinformation out there. And if I do make mistakes, I want to be called out and told. So questionable issues, past seems suspicious, as Justine is saying. If anybody has receipts that they'd like to share with me, I'm happy to look at them, but I always like to do my own research in addition. Now, the reason that I'm being kind of hard on her right now is because her opening statement really filled me with what the kids these days like to call the ick. It just made me so, so uncomfortable because she started out her opening statement by feigning outrage at Dan Markel's murder. And she referred to him as Danny. She said he didn't deserve it. His little boys didn't deserve it. It felt really patronizing that his little boys didn't deserve this difficult divorce and all of that. It just felt really disrespectful to me. It was actually kind of infuriating. And she tried to make this, she made a big deal about making this case about saying everybody else in the case is going to refer to him as Danny. And so I'm going to refer to him as Danny too, as if she were part of the club who's mourning Danny and not actually defending Danny's killer. By the way, the lead prosecutor on this case never once referred to him as Danny. The lead prosecutor referred to him as Dan or Dan Markel the entire time. It felt to me like Jackie was trying to be really familiar and sort of be with this crowd who's outraged about Dan's death. And it just came across as very disrespectful and very patronizing. She made this comment about Skype as if she didn't really understand what Skype was, but it's kind of this newfangled invention. I don't even know if it's around anymore. It was like, come on. We all know that Skype is still a thing. Court TV uses Skype. Every time I've gone on Court TV to be on Vinnie Politan's show, they call me via Skype. So yeah, it's 100% a thing that's still around. It's not complicated to use. It's no harder than FaceTime. So what is she trying to be relatable and say like, maybe these juries don't know about this newfangled Skype thing, but it just felt gross to me because it was disingenuous. I wrote several times that it was infuriating. She was feigning this emotionality, this grief. She was crying, but not crying. It reminded me of Lori, actually. How Lori changes the tone and inflection of her voice to make you think she's emotional when she actually really isn't. She talked about Dan Markel being brutally taken, and she changed the inflection of her voice when she said that. I don't even want to imitate it because it was so disgusting to me. She talked about the alienation that happened via Skype. And she tried to paint Donna Adelson as someone who was just a working person. She was just working every day, just like the rest of us. You know, she was normal. She was kind, caring, loving. She cares more about people than she does about anything else. I'm sorry, but all evidence to the contrary. I haven't seen a single shred of evidence that paints Donna Adelson as kind or caring or compassionate or loving or someone who cares about people. And if she had evidence that that was the case, she damn well should have presented it during her opening statements, because opening statements aren't arguments. They aren't evidence. You notice that the prosecution brought emails into their opening statement that hadn't been admitted as evidence. And that was perfectly acceptable for them to do that because the judge had already told the jury that this is not evidence. Well, Jackie Fulford could have done the exact same thing for Donna Adelson. If there was a shred of a loving email out there, she could have brought that in during her opening statement, but she didn't. Guess why? Because it doesn't freaking exist. I bet you there is absolutely no evidence out there that could prove anything close to the idea that Donna Adelson is kind, caring, loving, compassionate, any of those things. Absolutely not. I don't believe it at all. Then she went into extreme detail about the shooting of Dan Markel. And if I were a defense attorney, I would want the jury to be thinking as little as possible about that in connection with my client. I would be wanting to say something like, we're not disputing the fact that Dan Markel was brutally shot. My client is not the one who did it. And move the frick on. I don't understand why she felt like she had to go into such extreme detail about everything that happened. But it felt not only disrespectful, but also damaging to her client. Because this jury, in their minds right now, they've heard the opening statement of the prosecution and they're wondering whether or not that's true or whether there's some idea that is different than that. And instead of giving them a different idea, she doubled down on the idea the prosecution already gave. Like, I think Donna Adelson could argue ineffective counsel on those grounds, honestly. I mean, I don't know what I don't know. I'm not an attorney. But if I were the client at that point, I'd be like, what the hell are you doing? You're basically tying me to all these ideas about how horrible the shooting was. Why could you not just say he was shot, but not by my client, and then move on? I don't get it. Then she talked about the fact that the state's case was a theory, not evidence. That sounded really freaking familiar. I know a certain pro se defendants who said that in their opening statement, probably at least twice. And then I just had to laugh. At least there was a moment of levity in this crap show of an opening statement that was way shorter than the prosecution's, by the way, barely even 20 minutes to the prosecution's hour and 30-minute statement. And it was horrible. But then Jackie Fulford pulls out a piece of foam board where she has glued pictures of all the players in the case with little arrows that it looked like she printed out on a sheet of paper and then cut them out and pasted them. I think it was Salt and Pepper that said that she probably used a glue stick. You know, compared with this beautiful PowerPoint that the prosecution did that showed these beautiful pictures of Dan and the boys and actually also showed some pictures of the people who actually perpetrated the shooting. And then Jackie comes in with foam board with pictures glued to it like she's in a 7th grade science fair or something. It was pretty ridiculous, actually. Then she talked about how they put Katie on the payroll, and that was Charlie's business, not Donna's business. Well, if I remember correctly, Harvey's the one who started that business, and he's retired, as far as I know. But she tried to make this a really big deal about how it was Charlie's business and not Donna's business. Well, Donna was just the bookkeeper. Well, guess what? She who holds the purse strings has all the power, right? And that, I think, ultimately came back to bite her in the ass because guess who signed every single check to Katie Magbanowa? It might not have been Donna and Harvey's business, but Donna was the one who signed every single check. And that was basically what the defense left us with at the end of their opening statement, that Charlie was the one who put Katie on the payroll for Charlie's business. Guess who was the bookkeeper for that business? Donna Adelson. So the last thing that we heard from the defense attorney before closing their opening statement was that Katie had been put on the payroll at Charlie's business. This jury is smart. I think they're going to connect the dots. I think they're going to know. Guess what? Donna was the one who signed all the checks to Katie. So then the first witness, I thought we were going to hear from first responders first, but actually who we heard from first was Dan Markel's neighbor, James Geiger. And he testified that on the morning of July 18th, that he and his wife were sitting in the front room of their house with a big bay window, and they were next door neighbors to Dan Markel. And he was recalling later in his testimony that Dan and Wendy moved into that house about 5 years ago, or 5 years prior to the incident, as newlyweds with no children. And then he knew that there was divorce proceedings going on. He knew that it was kind of nasty, but they didn't really talk closely. They knew each other. And so this neighbor, James Geiger, testified that that Friday morning at about 10:30, he was looking out the window, and we actually get to see the view from the window. And then he heard a loud noise, and then he saw this car back down the driveway of Dan's driveway. And he walked out to see what was going on next door, because this light-colored Prius then sped away down the road. And he said they'd had some break-ins in the neighborhood, and he was afraid that Dan's house was getting broken into. And so he went over there to see what was going on, but it looked like Dan was waiting to back out of his driveway. So he didn't immediately think that, anything was amiss, but he waited and he waited, and he said, 10 minutes later or so, Dan never left his driveway. So then he felt like he needed to go over and check it out and see what was going on. He stepped into the garage and realized that there was broken glass. He stepped on some broken glass. And then he looked into the car and he saw Dan Markel's head that was covered in blood, and it was just moving left and right. He went into his pocket to see if he could grab his cell phone and call 911, but he realized he'd left his phone at home. So he ran back home, he grabbed his phone, and he called 911. And he said, between the time that he heard the loud bang and the time that he was able to grab his phone and call 911, it was probably less than 10 minutes, but more than 5 minutes. But it felt like forever. Now, according to Crash, which thank you so much for all of your comments and your help today. You filled in a lot of gaps of things that I didn't know. But the Prius was rented. The Prius that was rented by the gunman and the driver. It was actually the driver's name who was on the rental agreement. It was the same type and color of car that Jeff Lacasse owned. Jeff Lacasse was Wendy Adelson's ex-boyfriend. So it kind of looks to me like maybe some information may have gotten to these problem solvers that this was the exact type of car that they needed to rent, because Wendy was planning all along to blame it on him. In fact, she even told the police in her interview when they said, "Who can you think of that might have wanted to hurt Dan?" Wendy mentioned her ex-boyfriend. Maybe he was jealous. Pretty suspicious. So we get to hear the 911 call, which is pretty heartbreaking. And, the neighbor basically says that he doesn't really know exactly what happened. And I've heard this neighbor testify before, or I've seen transcripts of him saying before, he didn't know if Dan tried to hurt himself, or he didn't know if someone else tried to hurt him. But tragically, there was some confusion about what was going on. And the next person coming up on the stand was David Sims from the Tallahassee Police Department. He's retired, but he was the first one on scene. And he received the call to go to Dan's house while he was still at the substation. Now, they didn't mention this in testimony today, but I've heard before that there was some kind of miscommunication, and this officer believed that he was responding to a traffic accident and not to a shooting. And so there wasn't the same sense of urgency. But basically, he said he talked to the neighbor and he saw Dan. And I'm not going to go into detail about what he saw. It was incredibly disturbing. It was very sad. He said Dan had his cell phone in his left hand. His glasses were broken. He had a business card in his right hand. And part of his eyeglasses were lying on the floor of the car. And that he was breathing, and it was kind of like a sucking sound. And somebody in the chat, SJ it was, mentioned that this is called agonal breathing. I think that's how you pronounce it, which means that the person is essentially not really alive, but it's just a response that's happening. And we know that Dan lived for about 11 hours after this incident happened and then passed away in the hospital. The third witness to come up was Joanne Maltese, who is retired also from the Tallahassee Police Department. And she's a forensic specialist, and she took fingerprints. She collected evidence, the glass lens, the wallet, And she basically said that there were no prints that really could be identified on the car at all or on the door. They tested the door handle going into Dan's house to try and determine if this was a break-in, but there was nothing missing from his wallet. There was still cash in his wallet. His IDs and credit cards were still there. So they really did not believe that this was any kind of a robbery. Then they processed Wendy's car as well. And there was that bottle of Bullet bourbon sitting in the back seat with a receipt. And I noticed that, well, so we've heard that Wendy was going to a Stock the Bar party. It was her assignment to buy this Bullet bourbon. I saw in the receipt, it was about $26.99, which is about the right price for that type of a thing. But then they went to, Joanne Maltese went to the hospital to take evidence from Dan himself. And she photographed his arm, and there was stippling on Dan's arm, which indicates that he was very close to a gunshot. And the stippling is basically unexploded gunpowder that stains or tattoos the skin. And it was at this point that Donna Adelson started crying. And, you know, we were having this conversation in the chat. I thought for sure that Donna had attended Charlie's trial, but apparently not. She and Harvey stayed as far away from that trial as they possibly could. So this would be the first time that Donna is seeing any of these photographs or hearing about any of this evidence. And I'm really curious about why the crying. She clearly was trying to be emotional. I don't know if she actually was crying or not, because they didn't focus on her face long enough for me to be able to tell whether it was genuine. But I'm trying to think, putting myself in Donna's position. If I'm a master manipulator, and I don't really care about the victim in this case, I don't really care about their experience, and I'm not sad that they're gone, because that's what I wanted for my daughter. I wanted him out of the way so that I could have, you know, unsupervised custody with my grandkids, and so that my daughter could be closer to me. I'm trying to understand where this emotion would have been coming from for her. Was it because she saw this photograph and it was such damning evidence that she is scared that she's not going to be acquitted? To me, that's kind of the only thing that really makes sense. Because I can't imagine that Donna, I think they're kind of synonymous. I don't think that it's likely that she has any compassion for Dan or for the Markels at all. If so, where was this compassion before, when you were trying to solve your problem? So I'm trying to figure out where that crying came from, if it was in fact genuine, which it may not have been. I wasn't able to view it for long enough. Then the fourth witness of the day was Anthony Clark, who was the associate medical examiner, and he presented evidence of Dan's autopsy, which again, I'm not going to go into here because it was pretty disturbing. It's always difficult to hear when you know that there's this innocent person whose life has been taken, leaving behind two innocent young children who are now, unfortunately, forced to spend their lives with the people who conspired to kill him, allegedly. So then there was a lunch break. And after lunch, when we came back, there was a lot of motion, unpacking motions. How am I trying to say this? There have been so many motions by the defense to have these emails excluded and to not be brought in as evidence. And I've seen these pretrial motions, and I've seen the judge rule on these already. And it seems like the defense keeps coming back to try and argue the same thing over and over again. And that's basically what was happening today. So understandably, the prosecution was a little upset because they had prepared all of these emails, prepared to bring them in. There was no objection by the defense originally. And now all of a sudden, there's an objection. And so the judge was very patiently trying to figure out, what is your objection? And essentially, after 30 minutes or more of, hemming and hawing and kerfuffle and looking through binders while we all just sat there twiddling our thumbs, the defense was able to say, I don't think there's enough foundation that these emails prove that Donna Adelson, quote unquote, hated Dan. And so essentially, the judge got super annoyed because he's like, look, I've heard these arguments before. They're the same arguments that I have heard. So unless you have something new, I'm tired of wasting the jury's time. Then, Jackie started complaining about the fact that these emails came in a giant binder and they weren't in any sort of a date order. And it was just an absolute mess for them to have to comb through them. And I was thinking to myself, if I was a prosecuting attorney and I wanted to screw with the defense and I had a crap ton of evidence, I'm not going to organize it for them. That's not my job. They asked for the discovery. I'm just going to give them the discovery, give it all in a big binder and let them sort it out. Maybe that's petty. Maybe that is against the rules. I don't know. If there are any attorneys or attorney adjacent people, where's Aida Shah when we need him? Come in here and let me know. But that would be my inclination. And I just realized, I'm so sorry, Susie Catherine. This happened like 10 minutes ago. And Puzzle Pieces too. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for the super sticker. And Susie Catherine, thanks so much for the super chat. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate your support. Hey, don't forget to leave your DNA. Thanks. Normally I notice those a lot sooner, and it was like just about to leave and I was like, oh no. So I appreciate you. Thank you. I want to go back up here and see what did you say, Joe Schmo, that was so well articulated. Guilty people can often work themselves into tears at the thought of their own self-pitied position. LVD, Murdaugh, many, many more. Her emotions were not real, though, but the cause of them, suspect. I don't think that LVD ever actually shed any real tears. I didn't actually ever see any real tears. So I'm not going to give her that much credit, but I do agree. I can actually work myself up into being emotional if I think about something that is sad or harmful to me, if I really need to in the moment. But I wouldn't do that unless I was acting, which, when I used to perform, I would do stuff like that. But I wouldn't do that in a situation where I expected people to believe that was really coming from me, Megan, and not a character that I'm playing, because I guess I'm just not manipulative like that. But I can see where, narky people would do that. Defense is tag teaming. I agree with this, and I did not know that was against the rules, but I was like, is that fair? Thank you, Salt and Pepper, for dancing your dainty toes all over that like button. Every time I see your name and the picture of the oranges, it's like this cognitive dissonance for me, because I'm like, salt and pepper doesn't go with oranges. It's just, I don't know. I'm not saying I don't like it. It's actually, I recognize it now. Anyway, this went on for quite some time before the judge finally ruled, as he has done in the past. Look, these emails can come in. It's just that the prosecution is going to have to lay some foundation with each of these witnesses. Prosecutor said, I wasn't really planning to do that. I'm not really prepared to ask those kinds of questions. I'm almost prepared. I could be prepared, but, can we just take it on a case by case? And that was basically what the judge said that could be done. So then we have the lead detective on the case, Craig Isom. He's retired from the Tallahassee Police Department. And he said that he testified that he went and met Wendy at a restaurant where she was having lunch with a couple of her friends. I, for some reason, was under the impression that this was a larger group of people, but it was only like 2 or 3 other people. This was approximately 3 hours and 50 minutes, 50 minutes after the shooting. She was not detained. She was not under arrest. She wasn't read her Miranda rights. In fact, she was given a victim's advocate because they didn't believe she really had anything to do with it at this point. But Detective Isom did know that there was a very contentious divorce that was including a custody battle. Now, again, there were some objections about foundation. And again, the jury had to leave the room. The judge got super annoyed because, again, they're making the same freaking argument that they have been making the entire time. So just so that you know, whenever I clipped out these individual testimonies for the videos I already posted on my channel, I scrubbed out the waiting time for all of the sidebars, and so that, you don't have to sit there and wait for all of that to happen. And also the defense attorneys like flipping through pages in a binder. I clipped some of those things out to make it a little bit shorter for people to deal with. Then he talked about Donna disparaging Dan at all the time. He referenced the fact that Donna's motion for, or Wendy's motion for a relocation was denied with prejudice, meaning she can't bring that up again. She can't refile another motion for relocation of herself and the children. This was denied on June 22nd of 2013. And after the ruling, that's when Donna sent that incredibly horrible email to Wendy saying that she should take the boys and go get their pictures taken in front of a Catholic church and send the pictures to Dan, and then arrange for the boys to be baptized Catholic and to invite Dan and all of his family to it. I believe that Donna was so personally offended by this motion for relocation being denied. That's when she lost it. That's when the narcissistic injury came out. That's when she decided, that's it. I'm done with this guy. We're going to bury him, literally. Because this was on June 22nd of 2013, and she set this plan in motion, and a year later, he was gone. Then there was another email where there was $1 million bribe, where Donna was going to basically pay Dan Markel $1 million if he would let Wendy and the kids relocate to Miami. Then he noted Dan Markel had a $2 million insurance policy, an actual $2 million policy, not an imaginary one like some people I'm related to. And then another $60,000 policy from Florida State University. In addition, the kids would have gotten $4,800 a month in surviving benefits, which would have gone to Wendy Adelson. He also had a pension and a 401k. In total, his estate was worth $2.7 million plus the insurance money. So that morning then, we go to the day of the incident. At 8:50 in the morning, Dan Markel dropped his two boys off at daycare. And then he went to Premier Fitness, and they brought into evidence the video of the Prius waiting in the parking lot for Dan to work out. Nobody got out of the car. Nobody tried to go in and work out. It was very clear that they were following him and they were waiting for him. Then they showed a video that came from a city bus, which showed the Prius at various different locations as it was following Dan Markel to his house and then leaving after the incident happened. The prosecutor mentioned in her opening statement that this was a painstaking process to gather all of the evidence of the whereabouts of the Prius, and I believe it. They had to, first they tried to use the Sun Pass, which is what people use on the toll roads, and it's really easy to see because they have the cameras where the car is at what time, and it even sometimes shows the driver clear enough to see it. But they didn't really have anything to go on because they couldn't put the Prius together with anybody that knew Charlie or the Adelsons or any of that. So what they ended up having to do was look at cell phone records, and that's how they ended up getting these people. They had the cell data that placed the two individuals in the Prius along all of these locations, following Dan and then going to his house. And then they were able to pull the bus footage and pull the traffic cam footage. So it was a painstaking process. The car was rented, and I missed the exact dates, but essentially it was supposed to be rented for a couple of days, and then it was returned late. And so that's one of the reasons that they were able to get these guys, because they kept the car out too long. And then they pulled up that there was a traffic citation from one of these two individuals, but that was in a different car. And then they started talking about the gang names of these two guys. And I've heard them before, but my brain always just kicks them out because it was like Tudo and Tito. And I was like, Tudo and Tata, Tudo and Titi. I couldn't remember their gang names, but they brought that up as well. But that's what led them to Catherine. And that's when they realized that Catherine was working at a dental office, not Charlie's dental office, but a different dental office at the time. But from September of 2014 until March of 2016, she was on Charlie Adelson's payroll. But they could never find any evidence that she was actually employed at the dental office. They visited the dental office. She was never there. They didn't have any sort of a job title or job description for her. So there was no evidence at all that she was doing any actual work for the dental office from which she was being paid. Okay, sorry about that. And then this was when the bomb drop came. During this testimony by Craig Isom, every single check that was paid to Katie Magbanua between September of 2014 and March of 2016 was signed by Donna Adelson. Donna actually did work at the dental practice, so she knew that Katie was not employed by the dental practice. There's even some pictures, I believe, of Donna and Catherine Magbanua walking on the beach together. So they clearly were in contact with each other. They clearly knew each other. And here Donna was signing thousands of dollars worth of checks to take care of Catherine Magbanua. So it wasn't until October of 2016 that Catherine was arrested. And Detective Isom said that basically he was going to arrest Catherine. She asked to call her attorney. She did call her attorney. His name was Tara Cowis. And he said, Katie hung up the phone with her attorney, and almost immediately, Detective Isom got a phone call from Charlie Adelson's attorney. That's a little bit suspicious timing when they hadn't really even tied those two together yet. Hey, Tom's wife, Susan, how are you? How's your grandson? I hope he's doing better. And I also hope you had a lovely time in Alaska. Are you back yet? I'm guessing you are if you're in reception and you can chat with us. I miss you guys. So there was a lot of objection to relevance over this. And the judge basically said, to lay the foundation, which of course the prosecutor did with absolutely no problem. So the guy who's causing all of these problems, his name is Josh Zellman. And I pointed out during jury selection that he reminds me a lot of Paul Giamatti. If we were going to do a movie about this, which I know they've done a ton of documentaries, but Paul Giamatti would definitely play this defense attorney. So he cross-examines Craig Isom, the detective. He says, Donna Adelson never said that she hated Dan, right? And the detective said, no, that actually came through the grandkids. The grandkids said to Dan that Donna hates you. She says you're stupid. All of this alienation happening from Donna. Then he said, do you practice family law? And he said, no, that's not my specialty. He said, well, did you realize that it's pretty normal for somebody to give a relocation incentive? Okay, but not $1 million. Usually it's some kind of a thing of like, I'll pay to move you there. I'll help with your moving expenses. I'll help with plane tickets. It's not $1 million freaking dollars, okay? Then he pointed out that Wendy didn't take Donna's suggestion about baptizing the kids Catholic. Well, that's true, but that doesn't mean that Donna didn't make the suggestion and that she wasn't very heavily involved in trying to control Wendy's movements. By the way, not to the benefit of the children, but for Donna's own benefit. Then the defense attorney pointed out that there were only 2 employees in Charlie's dental practice other than Donna, and there was no written job description for any of them. And he said, no, that's actually true. But then they talked about the phone call that came from Charlie's attorney. And he said, it's not that abnormal, right? For somebody's attorney to call you. He said, no, but it was shocking to me because of the short time frame. And Charlie's attorney would have been the only person with immediate knowledge about Catherine Magbanua's arrest. There had been no press releases. None of the media knew. So far, the only people that knew were Detective Isom and Catherine Magbanua, and then she called her attorney. Well, that attorney immediately called Charlie Adelson's attorney, and that attorney called Detective Isom in just lickety-split, short time frame. Yeah, and Mike Hunt says that the $1 million, according to Charlie, was that Dan can use it to fly back and forth from Miami to Tallahassee, sort of like a state senator. Was he flying private, Was the jet made of gold? Was he having caviar and champagne? Because $1 million buys a lot of freaking plane tickets. I can't believe for a second that that was not a bribe. So anyway, thank you, by the way, love always, for pointing that out. I'm not making fun of you, or sorry, Mike, I'm not making fun of you. I'm just saying that's kind of a lot of money for plane tickets. I think it's kind of ridiculous. So then the defense attorney brings up the quote, grandmother motion, which was where Dan tried to prevent Donna Adelson from having any unsupervised visitation with his kids. He said, the kids told him that Donna said to the children, your dad is trying to take my sunshines away. And they said, Donna hates you. Donna always had these gross names of referring to Dan, calling him gibbers, referring to him as Elvis, saying he was stupid, all of these things, alienating these kids against their dad. Then they talked a little bit about the emails. Now, this is something I called out in my review of these emails the other day, is that there was this Donna Harvey at gmail.com, I think it was, this toxic thing where couples share an email address or they share a Facebook profile because what? They're not adults and they can't be trusted to have their own profile or their own email that's private. So that's where some of this confusion was coming from, is that the defense attorney was trying to say they both use this email address. Some of the emails were signed from Dad, and some of them were signed from Donna. So how do you know which email is written by which person? Well, just find the one that's dripping with sarcasm and contempt and Nazi references, and those are the ones that are written by Donna. The Evites, those came from Dad, basically. Sorry, guys, I'm feeling pretty snarky about this whole situation. Then on redirect, the prosecutor made sure to clear up the fact that some of the emails were signed by Dad, some of them were signed by Mom. It was pretty apparent which was coming from which, who wrote what, and they were signing things appropriately as they each wrote them. And there was never a situation of Harvey writing an email and signing it, love Mom, or vice versa, as far as they could prove. Now, then there was a long break, and the final witness of the day was Luis Rivera. This is the man who drove the Prius. And he testified that he was recruited by Sigfredo Garcia, to help him with this job. He testified that he did not know initially that this was going to be a shooting. He thought maybe they were going to rob him or scare him or something like that. This man struck me to be a very sincere person. It also pained me to see, and maybe this was just because of the circumstances, because when he started testifying, I had the volume turned off because I had to take a phone call real quick. And so for the first few minutes that he was testifying, I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I was just observing his facial expressions and his demeanor. And he seemed to me to just be very sad. It reminded me a little bit of Brandon Boudreaux, his brow furrowed, sort of hunched over a little bit in his seat, very soft-spoken for the most part, except when the stupid attorney got his name wrong twice. He just seemed very sincere. And it sounded to me like he really didn't want to have anything to do with this crime. But he did it because this guy was his best friend. So he was the driver. He's serving time in prison for second-degree murder. He pled guilty to these charges. And he received a sentence of 19 years, which he's serving concurrently with the federal charges that he's facing. And the attorney asked him, what does it mean to cooperate with the authorities? And he said, it means that you tell on somebody. And she said, tell on who? And he said, tell on my co-defendant, tell on Katie. And then they showed a picture where he pointed out that, Katie was Sigfredo Garcia's wife. they had an on again, off again relationship. They weren't always together, but they always sort of found their way back to each other. And the prosecutor asked him why it was that they were doing this. And he said he wasn't really sure, but he heard that was because Wendy wanted the kids. It was because some lady wanted the kids and this guy was in the way. Thanks for this, Georgiana Thornton. Appreciate it. I thought it was a little bit humorous that he referred to Charlie as Katie's side piece. Justine, thanks for pointing this out. Lewis got a deal, and this is the first time he's mentioned Wendy's name. In past trials and police interviews, he said the lady wanted Dan gone, which could have meant Donna. That'll come up in cross-examination in just a minute. We'll talk about that too. But he said he knew nothing about the Adelsons. He got $35,000 for doing this, and he thinks $40,000 went to Sigfredo, and the rest went to Katie. And all they had was a picture of Dan and his address. They came to Tallahassee twice, once in June and once in July. He said that he put his own apartment number on the rental agreement. And he said on the first trip, they just followed Dan. He said that he bought a gun on the streets, you know, sort of under the table, specifically to kill Dan. It was a .38. But the first trip, Dan had his kids with him. And so they didn't approach him at that point. And also then Dan sort of lost them. I don't think he knew he was being followed necessarily, but they just lost track of him. So Lewis said that he rented the Prius. They took their phones with them, but they turned them off for the actual incident. And then on the way home, there was an incident where Sigfredo accidentally shot out the gas line of the Prius they rented, and they met a drug dealer who helped them repair that. Then on the second trip, they said they saw Dan drop off the kids at the daycare, and they knew that Dan was leaving out of town. And when the prosecutor asked, how did you know that? He said, Tudo told me, and Katie had told Tudo, and Wendy had told Katie. He said he was the driver, not the shooter, and that Tudo shot Dan through the window 2 times. He said he didn't want to be the shooter. Then he talked about hiding the gun. They threw it in the ocean at some random overpass. And then they went to get food and then went to the ATM, which kind of showed their progression leaving from Tallahassee. Then Sigfredo Garcia called Katie the next day, or called Katie right away after it was done so that they could meet her the next day and get paid. He said that Katie Magbanawa brought the money to his house, and it was stacks of $1,000 stapled together. And he said that was very strange. He'd never seen anything like that before. He said he bought a motorcycle with the money. And there was a picture of the motorcycle he bought as well as the car that Sigfredo bought. He said he didn't know the dentist. He didn't know the dentist was paying. And when the prosecutor said, if you would have known that the dentist had these stacks of $1,000 bills sitting in his safe, would you have done something different than harming this other guy? He said, yeah, I just would have gone and robbed him. Then it was time for cross-examination. And as the camera panned over to the defense table, we could see Donna Adelson whispering hurriedly to her defense attorney. I was thinking to myself, yep, she's still trying to control everything. She's still trying to do all she can to get her narrative out there the way she wants it. I bet you those attorneys have had the worst time with Donna, trying to tell them, okay, I know that's how you want to do it, but that's not legal. Or I know that's a great idea, but we can't really do it that way. And it kind of makes me wish that somebody was there to tell Lori those things when she was representing herself. But it made me think if Donna was representing herself, this would have gone very, very differently today. So on cross-examination, Lewis reiterated that on the first trip to Tallahassee, Dan lost them. And then on the second trip, Dan dropped off the kids at school and then went to the gym, but they weren't expecting them. They weren't expecting Dan to go to the gym, and made it clear that it was Wendi that wanted Dan killed. Then the defense attorney got his name wrong. And it was a little bit of an abrupt moment, because she approached him with this picture and said the wrong name. And he got I could see this flash of anger going across his face. That's not me. Say the right name. She apologized profusely. She corrected herself. I could tell she was trying to be deferential to him, but I could also tell he was angry at that kind of disrespect for getting his name wrong. I can't even really explain what that must have felt like for him. You know, he's in prison for 19 years for doing something that he probably didn't want to participate in the first place. And he's here doing a favor for the defense, for somebody he probably despises anyway. And they don't even have the common courtesy to say his name correctly. I don't know. I have so many mixed feelings about this witness, you guys. I just have this huge mixture of like compassion and sorrow, sadness. I don't know. I'm going to have to spend some time unpacking this. This is a good point, Love Always. Lewis felt honest in his testimony. That's what he came across to me as, just very honest, very sincere. Prison probably got him clean. Hopefully he's changed. Must be scary also being considered a snitch in prison. Could be, yeah. Big mistake for her to call him Garcia. So the defense attorney then showed him a picture. And I found this incredibly disrespectful too, because she was treating him like a child. She said, do you remember? I gave you a picture and I asked you to put a 1 next to the person who is Katie. And I asked you to put a 2 next to the person who is Sigfredo. And I asked you to put a 3 next to you, and then a 4 next to Dan, and then a 5 next to Wendi, and then put an X next to the people that you didn't know. And that was Donna and Harvey. So she was trying to point out that Lewis knew all of the players in this game except for Donna and Harvey. And there was no redirect about that. I felt she was very patronizing and very rude. And then at the very end of that testimony, when Lewis was released, they did say that he was possibly going to be recalled. Donna Adelson took in a huge deep breath and let out a huge big sigh. You can tell the stress of this is getting to her. She's screwed. The evidence against her is damning. And when she gets up there and opens her mouth, it's definitely going to be, I think, the nail in her coffin. When the jury sees, reads, hears in these emails the way that she talks about Dan, so dismissive, so disrespectful, so dehumanizing, and the way that she's trying to control every single thing that Wendi does, it's not going to go well for her. So this is a new case for me. It is exactly, puzzle pieces, another example of a sick, enmeshed family. I did not expect for this to feel emotional for me today. But that last testimony, I don't know what it was about Lewis, but I'm going to spend some time thinking about this because, this is the man who drove the car for the man who shot Dan Markel. And then they went out and bought a motorcycle and a car. I think maybe part of it is the fact that they live in such a different world where they are, quote unquote, the problem solvers for people who don't know how to solve their own problems. And maybe that's kind of what resonates with me, is that Donna she felt disrespected by Dan, and she realized that she couldn't control him. And narcissistic people with these kinds of controlling patterns of behavior, when they realize they can't control somebody, they just absolutely melt down. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to handle it. It's kind of like we saw Lori when her manipulation tactics weren't working in court, she melted down. And then she got histrionic. And then she started malingering. And it made me wonder if Donna is going to malinger too. I wonder if she's going to be too sick to testify. She's definitely on the witness list. It's been made very clear that she's going to appear and that she's going to testify. But I'm just curious to know if she actually will make it to the stand, or if she's going to come down with some kind of jailhouse bug or try to fake COVID or something. Anyway, thank you for being here with me. I'm really interested to hear your comments and your questions. If you're watching this on the replay, please leave a comment for me and let me know what you're thinking, because I always like to hear other people's opinions. And especially since this is a case that I don't know as well as my own family's case, I'm always worried that I'm missing some critical detail that's going to explain everything. But the bottom line for me is that this is another enmeshed family, another manipulative, controlling person who doesn't know how to have relationships with people that aren't transactional. It really was the worst thing for me to read those emails and realize that Donna doesn't care at all about those boys. She only cares about using them to get what she wants. And that's what bullies, narcissists, whatever you want to call them, that's their pattern of behavior. If you've got someone controlling in your life and you want to know how to deal with them in a more peaceful way, if you want to learn how to set unbreakable personal boundaries so that they don't rob you of your personal peace, I have an e-course, and you can find the information on my website at third-verse.com, or you can email me at askmegan@gmail.com. Megan with 2 E's. I'm really glad to hear this, Joe Schmo. Encouraging news from Tom. Miles, his grandson, is going through therapy every day, making steady progress. Still a long road, but a lot of encouraging signs and miraculous doctors and nurses. Thank you for sharing that. That makes my heart happy tonight. It is all about control. It's hard to believe that Donna and Charlie would want dead, but she didn't, meaning Wendy. I'm guessing you're talking about her. I really still think that the jury is out, no pun intended, on Wendy. I think there's plenty of evidence that she knew exactly what was going on. Her behavior just makes her look really suspicious and really guilty. Thanks for pointing this out, Kiko Jump. Although, I don't know, it just kind of proves my point that the defense attorney was being really condescending to him. And I didn't like it. I hated it. I hated seeing, I don't know, for some reason, it felt to me like he was in a vulnerable position. Like he really didn't have any choice but to appear here, even though he probably didn't want to. I think maybe there was a part of him that was afraid that by him appearing and admitting that he was the driver and that Tudo was the trigger man, that maybe was going to acquit Donna or make the jury more sympathetic to her. And maybe he had some ambivalent feelings about that. I don't know, but it felt to me like they were taking advantage of him. It felt to me like they were using him. And maybe he felt that and didn't like it. I don't know. I still need to go back and figure out why I'm feeling so emotional about his testimony. It was so heavy, first of all, just like knowing that the value of a life to those two guys is $35,000. Like that was the main thing that I kind of took away. But I saw him as a person, I saw him as an individual. Maybe he came up in a hard life and didn't have a lot of choice but to resort to, violence. I'm not trying to excuse what he did, or I'm not trying to make it seem like it was okay, but I always want to understand, for some reason, I'm just having so much compassion for that person and the position that they're in. Again, I think part of my mixed feelings is realizing how little they value Dan Markel's life. And the other part of it is like, they also didn't value their own. And like, that's the world we live in right now. And I hate it. Anyway, thanks for helping me to dig through some of these feelings, you guys. I really appreciate it. Definitely the Adelsons feel like the kind of people that go for revenge. I absolutely think the whole reason this happened is because Dan got that motion denied, you know, the relocation motion. I think this was revenge 100%. I also think Wendy knew. Wendy's going to testify the prosecution, but plans to plead the fifth for the defense, which it is her right to do, but that doesn't mean that they can't still bring charges against her, because they totally can. Yeah, this is a really good point, Jill Kelly. She's reading the jury wrong. She thinks they're racist like her. That's another thing that entitled people, arrogant people, think that everybody thinks like them, instead of realizing there are people out there with different perspectives and different opinions. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know he's testified in other cases too. That's true. He may be illiterate, but he knows what's going on. He never wanted to kill anyone, and I feel that. That's maybe what I'm feeling too. Oh, goodness. I'm in San Antonio to, you know, the deal with him. Yeah, maybe there's a part of me, you know, that I taught one school year in an inner city school, and I was teaching choir, but I wasn't teaching choir. I was teaching life skills, and we occasionally got to sing. I saw what those kids came up in, what they were growing up in, the lessons they were being taught, and they just never had an opportunity to have a normal life because of the soup that they swim in. It's just, it surrounds them. They absorb it, and it's so, so hard to get out of it. Thanks for this, Joe Schmo. Appreciate it. Yeah, I think Wendy definitely. I think she planned it with her brother. I think she was just smarter about not talking about it so much. Donna was such a big mouth, and she believed that she was never going to get caught. That's another part of this hubris. You know, I don't know, Justine. I agree with you. It's horrible to call somebody a racist if they aren't really. But she was incredibly condescending. She was incredibly contemptuous towards Lewis. And I didn't see her act that way to other people, but maybe I'm wrong. And I'm seeing like this much of a snapshot of her. Why was Donna wearing headphones? This is literally the most asked question I have gotten throughout the entire day. I can't tell you how many people have asked me this question. I really think the defense attorneys are trying to play up this little old sweet grandma thing, but you're right. She did not wear them in the preliminary hearings. She didn't even wear them during jury selection. So I think that they are trying to play her up as like, oh, I'm just frail and old and I can't hear very well. And she just kept them on the same day. I don't think she actually needs them. He was smart to take the deal and tell the truth. Yeah. Harry says she doesn't want to try and defend her mother. She's playing the jury trial game. Wendy, I believe so. But also, I'm just going to point this out too. The thing that I found most despicable about Wendy is that she immediately threw her family under the bus as soon as she was interrogated by the police. I believe she knew, and I believe she deliberately threw them under the bus at the first opportunity that she got, literally the first, like few minutes into her interrogation. Charlie also can't shut up, as evidenced by the phone calls between him and his mother, where they literally tell each other everything. It's like, do you want to know the size, color, and frequency of each other's bowel movements too? Like, they just could not shut up. It's gross. Yeah, I experienced some of this too, where I wasn't allowed to say things to parents because a lot of them didn't live with their parents. 60% of the kids I was teaching were being raised by grandparents or aunts and uncles because their parents were either incarcerated or addicted or absent. It's really, really sad. Donna's just listening to music. Do you think it's ABBA? What do you think? What do you think she's listening to? So I want to end on a little bit of levity tonight. I'm going to be back on Monday. I'm going to stream the entire trial. I'm going to do the same thing that I did today. I'm going to be there with you chatting as much as I can all day long. And then at the end of the day, I'm going to clip out all the individual things and post them. Hey, Kiki, great to see you. I'm glad you're here. I hope you're doing well tonight. And yes, Aaron, thank you for pointing this out. I have listened to a lot of the jail phone calls on Pretty Lies and Alibis. And also Surviving the Survivor. They're the ones who introduced me to this case. Joel Waldman is the one who told me that the Adelsons were the Jewish Daybells. And he's the one who got me interested in paying attention to this case. And I forget why I brought that up, but it's because I've consumed a lot of their content on this, and it's where I've learned a lot of what I have from the case. So I really appreciate their coverage. Everybody go watch Surviving the Survivor. I'm going to take a big break tomorrow. I have a very long walk tomorrow. But other than that, I'm going to relax a little bit. And I want to end the night with just a little bit of levity. I showed some of these pictures today earlier, and I had some, oops, hit the wrong button. I had some little captions for Donna. And here we go. Some of my favorite pictures, along with some of my favorite captions. This is what I do when I'm just watching trial, and I'm just, listening or waiting for sidebars. I know these are super low resolution. They were just screenshots that I just felt like might be fun. It's a really interesting look on her face there. One more, just for funsies. There we go. And with that, because I happen to see it in chat right here, I have a walking routine on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I do 2 to 3 miles on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Tuesday and Thursday, I do leg work, like squats and lunges, and I do some arm work and some weightlifting. And then on Saturdays, I do a super long walk that is anywhere between 5 and 10 miles. So just depending. But that's it. Yeah, it's super, super easy. In fact, I'm going to post my walking routine over on my Patreon. How's that? So if you would like to follow me along, we can help hold each other accountable. I have a little chat over there. That's one of my free chats. I guess now I'm a domestic coordinator too. I have several free chats over there on my Patreon. One of them is a trial chat where we can talk about the trial. One of them is for holding each other accountable for healthy habits. And then there's another one that's just general for funsies and for, posting silly things and pictures of my dogs and stuff like that. And then my paid Patreon, that's where I do my cooking and singing and whatever, although I haven't done enough of that lately. So that reminds me, tomorrow I'm going to be posting some Patreon stuff. So I appreciate you guys being here. Thanks for your support. Thanks for caring about justice for Dan Markel and his family. His parents and his sister were in court today. I think about his boys all the time and hope that they get to be reunited with Dan's family very soon. Dan Markel's mom has written a book about her family's experience, and she was instrumental in getting a law passed so that more grandparents can have custody of their kids. Kiki, I'm wishing you all the best. Better you than me. I love to hike, but I don't like hiking in Texas. I like hiking where I can get to a waterfall and where it's cool enough. Thanks for this, Tom's wife, Susan. Yeah, it's been a long thing, longer than my family's case. So it's crazy, crazy, crazy. This is a great idea. 30-day walk a mile for cancer in September. I love that. I really appreciate hanging out with you guys. I think you're awesome. And it's really, really fun, Yeah, go read Ruth's book. It's available on Amazon. And unlike Wendy's book, it has a, I think of like a 4.7 star review. Wendy's book has like a 3.4 star review. Terrible. Oh my gosh. Ugh, you guys, Kiki and we have more stories to tell. So on Monday nights, it's going to be family night. Me and Kirsten. It's a hoot. It's so much fun. It has nothing to do with trials or cases, but I absolutely love our time together. So join us on Monday nights. Appreciate you guys being here. Please take really good care of each other, but most of all, and I think people don't take me seriously enough when I say this, please take care of yourself, because if you don't put on your own oxygen mask first, you're never going to be able to help anybody else. And so I really mean it when I say do the thing that is the most loving thing for you so that you can be the best you for the people you care about. 11 years since Dan Markel was murdered. Justice for Dan. Love you guys. Take care.